Allen Company and Big Al will be at the I-80 Truckers Jamboree. See you there.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Reddick.
As the number of disasters escalates, it becomes more and more difficult to track what state has what kind of emergency declaration and how it affects you. Scott Thompson finds out how Congress wants the process cleaned up from Landline Magazine's Tyson Fisher. Now that all the central parties in the federal government and enforcement are in agreement regarding English proficiency, what's required to get this show on the road? I'll get deep into the details with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. And finally, 2 states are taking action regarding slow traffic in the left lane of interstates and other multi-lane highways. Scott discusses that and more with our state legislative expert, Keith Goebel. And now, here's Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. You hear it pretty often here on the show and read about it on landline.media when a disaster strikes and states issue an emergency declaration, creating a patchwork of declarations that can create some relief from hours of service requirements. But there is a new effort to make some changes on that, and joining us with the details is Tyson Fisher, Associate Editor of Landline Magazine. Tyson, always good to see you.
Yeah, pleasure being back.
So we've got dozens of Republican members of the House here signing on to a letter about this very issue. We're going to get into, of course, what they're asking for here, but let's get into the problem that caused them to band together and reach out.
So, yeah, anytime there is some type of emergency, and when we think of emergencies, it's mostly stuff like natural disasters. So it's hurricanes, wildfires, stuff like that. When this happens, states often state governors will have a declaration of emergency. And in those cases, it allows truck drivers hauling for relief efforts. It waives the hours of service. It allows them to get to where they need to be quicker. That's kind of the idea. The problem that we've been having over the past several years is that sometimes those emergency declarations are not soon enough or not wide enough in scope. So it kind of causes some issues for those who want to provide relief for these emergency efforts. And so that's kind of what some fuel haulers specifically have been kind of raising that issue, because they're the ones who are the most impacted by this. I think that would be the highest sought after commodity in any type of emergency. Kind of reached out to lawmakers, and lawmakers listen, and now they're telling FMCSA, let's do something.
Yeah, and this is an example of, again, reaching out to lawmakers,
right.
and it does bear fruit sometimes. I think it does help that we've got Congressman Mike Bost on this letter, and actually Congressman Mike Collins as well. Both have a connection to trucking through their families or through themselves, actually, directly here. But again, they are joined by, I don't remember the number exactly, but dozens of other members of the House here. And essentially, they're asking for action on this. I guess as we look at solutions here, what does that look like, I guess, is the question.
There's 2 points that they're trying to make here. The first one deals with the timing of these emergency declarations. So oftentimes, there's 2 types of emergency declarations. Usually the ones that are provided by the state, which is usually followed by or around the same time, one from the federal government, in this case FMCSA specifically, when it comes to hours of service and waivers and stuff like that. The issue is the timing. So usually the state declarations won't happen until maybe the day of the emergency, sometimes a day or 2 after the emergency has occurred. And the same thing with FMCSA. The only problem is if you're hauling for these emergency relief efforts, you kind of need to know ahead of time, or you need those hours of service waivers ahead of time so you can get there in time and you can provide the fuel or whatever else when they need it, which is when the tragedy strikes. So what these lawmakers are asking is that whenever it's feasibly possible for FMCSA to issue these emergency declarations at least 5 days before a reliably predicted disaster of emergency. So in the case of a tornado, that's obviously not going to happen because we don't know how those work.
Sure.
Hurricanes, on the other hand, we know about those well in advance. So that would be a great example for how this could work, which is basically what these lawmakers are saying. Say, hey, FMCSA, if you know that there's a major hurricane coming at least 5 days ahead, go ahead and blast off that emergency declaration. That way, these fuel haulers or whoever else can get there by the time this hurricane strikes, and then there's going to be no delay in getting that. And so, yeah, the first issue there being timing. And then the second thing that they're looking at is just kind of like the scope, the geographical scope of these emergency declarations. So a problem, again, is that usually these are state-by-state declarations. So, if there's like again, hurricane, good example. If one strikes, in the East Coast, Florida will have their emergency. Then you'll have one in Georgia.
Yeah.
But you have to wait for each one. But let's say you're in South Carolina and you're a fuel hauler, you don't have one. There's a patchwork that we talked about. What the lawmakers are asking FMCSA to do, which is just go ahead and send an automatic regional relief, not state by state. Don't give one for Florida or Georgia. Do like a southeast regional declaration of emergency. That way, it just will take care of everyone in one fell swoop. Again, because sometimes not a fuel hauler providing emergency relief, they may not be, based in, like, let's say, Georgia or Florida. It might be South Carolina or somewhere nearby, Alabama or whatever. They're going to need, to be covered by that HOS waiver too if they're coming from those other states. A regional declaration of emergency will take care of that. So again, it's a timing issue, geographical issue. And it's just to make sure that anyone who wants to provide relief during these emergencies can do so in a more timely, efficient manner, which the way it currently works, it's not terrible. It's just it could be more efficient.
Yeah.
And that's all they're asking for.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a long list of things that could be more efficient, and this is one of them too. I guess the question here as we kind of close it out here, Tyson, is FMCSA, does have the authority to do this, to declare regional emergencies. And this is a letter to the acting administrator there at FMCSA because we still don't have a confirmed one. I guess the question is, are they going to bite on this? It is something that it seems like it would be relatively easy for them to do, and we don't know the question or the answer to that question, obviously. But you wonder if they're looking at this and thinking, is this really a safety issue? I don't know.
I don't know why they wouldn't. It's very reasonable.
Yeah.
I don't see anything controversial about this at all. As you pointed out, this requires no changes in regulations or authority. This is something that FMCSA can just do at the drop of the hat. They can change that policy because it's a policy issue. It's not regulatory at this point. It is a policy of that. So, very easy to do, non-controversial. I wouldn't see why they wouldn't do it. So we'll just wait and see if they do. But again, I think it's reasonable, and I would like to see this get done. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of these things. Again, it seems like a no-brainer. It makes sense, and as you point out, it wouldn't be that difficult to do. We'll see if it actually happens now is the next step. You can read all about the letter that Tyson and I just talked about and be in the know about all the latest emergency declarations over on our website, landline.media. Tyson, we appreciate your time as always.
Thank you for having me.
And Mark, back to you.
Thanks, Scott. Congratulations to Dennis M. Raz of Manitowoc, Wisconsin. He's received the OOIDA Safe Driving Award for 40 years of safe, accident-free driving. That's the equivalent of a car driver going 300 years without causing a single accident. The OOIDA Safe Driving Award program is sponsored by Shell Rutella. And if you're interested in receiving the Safe Driving Award, you can find a link to more information at our website, landlinenow.com. Again, that website, landlinenow.com. Next, I'll find out how English proficiency will be enforced on the road and some other details from OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes, and we'll find out which two states are taking action on slow traffic in the left lane from state legislative expert Keith Goebel. We'll be right back. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Penske is the trusted source for quality used trucks. Whether you search our website, call our sales staff, or bid at our online auction, you are sure to find the right used truck for your business. Visit PenskeUsedTrucks.com to view our inventory and learn more.
High heat and low lubricity can break your diesel fuel down fast. Summer driving means crowded roads, more stress, dust, and a bigger risk of costly engine damage. Howe's Diesel Defender protects from the inside out, cleaning, lubricating, and fighting injector wear. Visit howsproducts.com.
With rising costs affecting everyone, switching to a genuine Vibertech TVD viscous damper can help you avoid expensive repairs and downtime. Save money and keep your truck running smooth with Vibertech TVD. Recommended replacement at 500,000 miles or 15,000 hours.
The orders are signed. CVSA has tossed in its 2 bits, and the U.S. DOT has said its piece. So now that all the central parties in the federal government and in enforcement are in agreement regarding English proficiency in trucking, what's required to get this show on the road, and when will it happen? Welcome back to Landline Now. This is Regulatory Roundup, and I'm Mark Rettig. I'm joined, as always, by OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Jay, how are you doing?
Doing well, Mark. Good to be with you.
Well, good to have you here. I think that most people in trucking are well aware that this regulation on English proficiency has been on the books for years, but it has not been in recent years enforced. So I'm wondering if we can go back a little ways and look at how we got here. This kind of started with an executive order from the president. I'm wondering if you can start by walking us through that and what it called for.
Yeah, right. And even before the executive order, certainly there had been an escalating industry push to really focus on the safety aspects of this provision, which, as you mentioned, is in the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations, 391.11B2, general qualifications of drivers, can read and speak the English language sufficiently to converse with the general public, to understand highway traffic signs and signals, and to respond to official inquiries and to make entries on reports and records. So back at the end of April, President Trump issued an executive order that had a number of provisions, but primarily was going to restore the English language proficiency regulations as part of the out-of-service criteria. And the executive order notes that America's truck drivers are essential to the strength of our economy, the security of our nation, and the livelihoods of American people. Every day, truckers perform the demanding and dangerous work of transporting the nation's goods to businesses, customers, and communities safely, reliably, and efficiently. So it is the policy of my administration to support America's truckers and safeguard our roadways by enforcing the common sense English language requirement for CMV drivers and removing needless regulatory burdens that undermine the working conditions of America's truck drivers. First provision that through the Secretary of Transportation and the FMCSA administrator, within 60 days, FMCSA would rescind a old guidance bulletin removing the English language proficiency regulation from the out-of-service criteria and issue new guidance to FMCSA and enforcement personnel outlining revised inspection procedures necessary to ensure compliance with those 391.11 regulations. And since the executive order was issued, we've seen a number of following actions to kind of carry out the intent, and gearing up here next week on June 25th for CVSA law enforcement personnel start these violations for English language proficiency not being in compliance with 391.111 will result in an out of service violation. So we've again have seen a number of actions, a few formal documents, and we kind of go through a summary of those to kind of, I think that give us a pretty good groundwork of what to expect beginning next week.
You mentioned the CVSA, the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance. Of course, that's a national association of commercial vehicle enforcement people and also some industry interests, including OOIDA, which has joined the group to represent truckers. They write the out-of-service criteria. It's actually not a federal document. And that was one of the things I was kind of curious about when the executive order came out is obviously they're going along with it, so it may be a moot point, but can the president order essentially a private organization to change one of their criteria?
He can certainly make the order, but as you mentioned, CVSA did need to act. And I'm sure throughout this kind of process where the White House and DOT were considering this action, they were probably communicating with CVSA. And that's a good point to mention is that it's not FMCSA regulating the out-of-service criteria. This is the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance that carries this out. And then kind of through procedure, CVSA dictates the policy and FMCSA kind of implements it formally into their regulation. So kind of timing-wise, it worked out that the week following the proclamation of the executive order, CVSA was holding a workshop where they were already considering petitions, one submitted by OIDA to restore the out-of-service criteria. I think the executive order really fast-tracked the process, and within that week, CVSA took a number of actions that would eventually lead to the June 25th date, reinstating English language proficiency violations into the out-of-service criteria. I think CVSA is also taking some pending actions where they are going to be submitting some petitions to FMCSA to harmonize different aspects of the out-of-service criteria as well with some other regulations. And those are still to come. But the really critical action was adopting what was guided by the executive order. I think they put in some kind of lead up time to ensure everything was in place to get law enforcement up to speed, and also awaiting some formal guidance from FMCSA, which we now have as well.
Something else before we go on, a little bit off topic, but I do think we need to give credit here where credit is due. You mentioned that CVSA acted to change the out-of-service criteria after the executive order, but one of the key figures in making that happen was OOIDA's Doug Morris, who really got in there and said this is a matter of safety, this is an executive order, and kind of stressed the need to move that issue along.
You're exactly right. Doug Morris, OIDA Director of Security and State Affairs, who's been our longtime liaison with CVSA, considering his background in law enforcement. He was actually down at the meeting, and on the heels of this executive order, I think really made clear to the CVSA representatives and the FMCSA leadership that was also in attendance that Hey, the orders are clear here from the president. We've got an opportunity to get within this 60-day period and to really make this reality and enforce the safety initiatives that President Trump wanted to see implemented. And I think in light of that, CVSA was able to act, rather quickly, and by the end of the week, these formal actions were taken, leading up to our, this change in policy that's going to be effective June 25th.
So let's go back to something you said a moment before I completely got us off topic there, and that is that the DOT, the U.S. Department of Transportation, and the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration has issued guidance, essentially a document about their interpretation or how to carry out a regulation. And they've mentioned here in terms of how you enforce this out on the road, kind of a two-step process. Can you walk us through how they're going to do this out there on the road?
Yeah. So, and also do want to mention that, after the executive order was issued, DOT, had to come up with some updated guidance. And as part of the rollout of the new guidance, Secretary Sean Duffy traveled down to Austin, Texas, appeared with OIDA leadership and some other representatives from the law enforcement community, Texas DOT, and to kind of, get the word out, highlight the significance of the policy, and really indicate that the administration is listening, and this was a safety action that could be remedied very quickly here. And they had a ceremony. They released the formal guidance, and yes, it kind of outlines the new policy with a two-step process. And the policy advises that FMCSA personnel initiate all roadside inspections in English. If the inspector's initial contact with the driver indicates that the driver may not understand the inspector's initial instructions, the inspector should conduct an English language proficiency assessment in order to evaluate the driver's compliance with the regulations. The assessment should consist of a driver interview and then, if necessary, a highway traffic sign recognition assessment. And the guidance, as well as an additional FAQ, frequently asked question document, kind of provides some details on how these assessments are going to take place. But it's really going to be a kind of a driver interview, and that would give the inspector the ability to determine if the driver is in compliance with the English language proficiency requirements. There is no need to progress to the highway sign assessment if the inspector determines that the driver is unable to respond to official inquiries in the driver interview portion. So lays out the guidelines of how this is going to unfold roadside. And really what we've heard now is that, every violation is going to result in that driver being placed out of service if it's determined by the inspector that the driver is not able to sufficiently speak English.
And just to be clear here, and I've heard Todd Spencer make similar statements and others as well, that I think a lot of people are caught up on that term English proficiency.
Yeah.
We're not talking about reciting the Gettysburg Address or memorizing Webster's Standard Dictionary. It's, can you speak and understand basic sentences? Can you read a sign that says bridge out? It really is at that level we're talking.
Exactly. Just a basic understanding of the English language, how to interpret different highway road signs, different signs on highway safety messages that you see on the road. The frequently asked questions document, lays out a few different questions that would allow the driver to understand how they're operating. For instance, the origin and destination of a recent or planned trip, the amount of time they spend on duty, including driving time, the information contained on their driver's license, the equipment on their truck that's subject to inspection. So certainly do not have to be, the world's finest English speaker or recite a dictionary, but you do have to understand some basic skills, basic information about the trucking industry, and certainly the key thing here, being able to read and comprehend highway signs when you're behind the wheel of a commercial motor vehicle.
And going back to something you said earlier, Jay, I think something that needs to be made clear over and over, and we've just got about a minute left before we have to take a break, but this is about safety. This is about road safety, and I think people are kind of missing that, especially folks outside trucking that don't understand the issue.
100%. And, on the road, behind the wheel of an 80,000-pound vehicle, there's no margin for error. And that margin can be really dangerous and really thin all too often. And sometimes the only thing separating safe trips from deadly ones is a simple road sign, is being able to understand a weather warning that may come across. And these signs aren't suggestions, they're warnings. They save lives. And that's why this English language proficiency regulations is on the books, why it was implemented. And I think we've seen in a few incidents over the past few years when this violation hasn't resulted in an out-of-service criteria, unfortunately, lives can be lost.
Okay. Well, Jay, we will come back after a short commercial break and talk more about this issue. And folks, I am talking with Jay Grimes of OOIDA about the English proficiency regulation. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
At Truck Stop, we've built a better load board for carriers like you. Sign up today and access over 600,000 loads on the most trusted online load board. Learn why the best in the business rely on Truck Stop to make more money and start driving your profit today.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Firestone's FD694 drive tire for long-haul and regional applications now delivers 126,000 more removal miles than the Yokohama TY517 MC2. Contact your Firestone commercial dealer to learn more.
Landline Now. Welcome back. Before the break, I was talking with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes, about the move by DOT and FMCSA toward enforcement of the English proficiency requirement that's contained within the federal regulations. And Jay, I want to get right back into this and go to some other aspects of the issue. And that comes down to kind of who is subject to being placed out of service when. This isn't one of those things where the rule applies in all situations. And one of the questions, I think, is, of course, the regulations we talk about primarily are for interstate or multiple state truckers versus intrastate, people that stay within one state. So is there a difference in how this regulation will apply to those two different types of truckers?
Yeah. So federal motor carrier safety regulations, applying to interstate drivers, and the out-of-service violations will only apply to interstate drivers going across different states who are subject to all the different and various federal motor carrier safety regulations. So that's an important difference to know if a driver's operating interstate versus intrastate. I think another kind of common question that's come up is border zones. How is this going to work in those border commercial zones that we see? And that drivers operating in the border commercial zones who fail the assessment, they will be cited for violations, but they will not be placed out of service upon those violations. So some areas around the borders where is a designated border commercial zone, a little different enforcement policies here. And a few other just notes for clarification that we've heard since the executive order was issued. Hearing impaired drivers that have exemptions through the FMCSA hearing standards will not be cited or placed out of service for English language proficiency violations. The executive order does not apply to any drivers who are operating in Puerto Rico, Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, or the American Samoa, the territories where U.S. has jurisdiction. And then lastly, another common question, we've got reciprocity for Canadian and Mexican drivers who are operating in the U.S. They are when they're operating on U.S. highways outside of the border commercial zones, they are subject to the executive order. So if they are found to be not in compliance with the English language proficiency violations, they will be placed out of service if you're a driver from Canada or Mexico. So those are some loose ends that have been discussed and kind of heard some different interpretations about. But again, the key date here is next week, June 25th, when CVSA law enforcement personnel from FMCSA will once again be violations of the English language proficiency regulations will result in a driver being placed out of service.
I want to go into a little bit of detail here on the border zones. And that, of course, is like a 20 to 30 mile area just over the border. It primarily seems to be talked about in relationship with the southern border the U.S. shares with Mexico. And that truckers registered to operate in Mexico can go into that 20 to 30 mile wide barrier to get freight into the United States for a U.S. authorized trucker. I have had a lot of people tell me over the years that, in particular in Texas, that a lot of people seem to treat the entire state like it's all the border zone, that you will see some of these border zone trucks as far north as Dallas. Did the federal regulations nail down the definition to the point where that would no longer be the case? And how is that going to affect enforcement north of that area?
So the commercial zones are outlined in the federal motor carrier safety regulations, and there's quite a few of them. But for these purposes, we're talking about, certainly not the entire state of Texas, more limited geographic areas by the borders where, as you mentioned, you've got a lot of cross-border traffic going back and forth. Some drivers are restricted to those border zones. Some operate beyond that now after a lot of controversy, which is a subject for another day. You also, have these designated commercial zones by ports sometimes as well. But really, I think the focus is going to be down in the Texas areas. But if you're not part of that border zone in Texas, it's not the whole state here. You will you can be cited and be placed out of service if you're operating outside those specific commercial border zone areas.
Something else I wanted to ask, and this is getting a little bit into the weeds, and I apologize for that, but in talking about the federal regulations, the overwhelming majority of the enforcement is done by state enforcement officials, and one way or the other, they have to adopt the Code of Federal Regulations regarding trucking into their state laws or regulations. Some of these states do what's called adopt by reference, basically some statement within their laws that says whatever the safety regulations are in the federal level, we hereby adopt them, their latest version, into state law. Could that affect some intrastate drivers as well as interstate?
Potentially down the line, but this is not going to be a case where, each state legislator has to adopt these separately for it to take effect within that individual state. I think we might see some of that potentially down the line when it comes to different fine levels for violations of different state regulations. But generally, that doesn't have to take place here now that CVSA has made those formal actions restoring the English language proficiency violations back into the out-of-service criteria.
There's a linked issue here that a lot of drivers have expressed concerns about, and that is what's called non-domiciled CDLs. And before we get into the issue, I'm sure there's some folks out there that hear that and go, what? What does that term mean, non-domiciled CDLs?
Yeah, so this is a term that kind of goes back and has a couple different meanings. And it's basically a separate class of license that either allows a citizen from a different state to get their CDL in a different state. But there's also provisions that allow a foreign citizen to get a CDL within the U.S. And there was some guidance issued back in 2019 that I think from our perspective really watered down the requirements for foreign citizens to be able to be certified here in the U.S. and acquire their CDL. And kind of what we've seen since that 2019 guidance is that different states and all these states, the states and the states are responsible for issuing CDLs. It's not FMCSA. So each state kind of has some different requirements and provisions for how they issue CDLs. And what we've kind of seen since 2019 is that some states have issued quite a few more of these non-domiciled CDLs, and it can be a lot easier for an individual to get their CDL. And again, we've seen a number of crashes that have, where a driver is found to have a non-domiciled CDL. And we think that, again, is a critical safety issue. And within the executive order issued by President Trump, there is also a provision there that calls for a review of non-domiciled CDLs issued by relevant state agencies to identify any unusual patterns or numbers or other irregularities with respect to non-domiciled CDL issuance. And one of the main problems we've kind of discovered in looking into the problematic issuance of non-domiciled CDLs is that no association, and there's an association that represents all the state driver's licensing agencies, and no states really seem to have any clear picture of how many non-domiciled CDLs they are issuing, what the formal processes are. So it's a confusing patchwork, and we don't really have a clear picture of how it's being administered. And that's what we're optimistic that this review will accomplish. And the second part of that is that DOT is going to evaluate and take appropriate actions to improve the effectiveness of current protocols for verifying the authenticity and validity of both domestic and international commercial driving credentials. And really, the English language proficiency regulations broadly goes back to making sure that drivers are qualified to operate safely on the roads. And it's not just the English language proficiency requirements. It's having comprehensive entry-level driver training. It's having comprehensive state testing and licensing protocols where there aren't all these different loopholes, where someone can get their CDL and be behind the wheel of an 80,000-pound vehicle without the training, without the proper testing in place, without the proper background checks across different states where they've had violations in one state, a different state is not aware of them, and they sign off on the driver getting their CDL. So there's a whole lot of improvement that we need to do from the entry-level aspect of this before a driver ever is pulled over roadside to improve safety. And that's really kind of an all hands on deck call, I think, from DOT, certainly something OIDA has been pushing for years. And, again, we think this executive order speaks to that. And, just within the last few months, there have been a number of stories kind of highlighting some of the loopholes that we've seen that need to be cleaned up at the state level here when it comes to CDL issuance. And of course, training as well is a big one. We've got the minimum entry-level driver training rules in place. But again, at this point, that's what they are. They're standard bare minimum. There's a lot of ways we can strengthen those and bolster those. So when drivers are, get on the road in their first year or two, they have the sufficient training to be able to handle all the thousands of different scenarios, weather conditions, road conditions that they're going to be faced with as a commercial truck driver.
You mentioned those incidents, and of course, we have several. We only have a couple of minutes left, so I'll just kind of bring up a few of them. A report out of Florida concerning the sale of CDLs, another case out of Oregon. And finally, a case involving a former trooper with the Massachusetts State Police. And from all these, I think it raises an obvious question. When we're talking about the English proficiency standard and enforcing that, is this just treating the symptoms of the problem, or is there a deeper cause here related to the whole process of how this country issues CDLs?
Yeah, I think that's really at the heart of it, is this training and licensing, kind of across the board. We've kind of seen, especially in recent years, it's way too easy to enter the trucking industry, get your authority, get your CDL, and be out on the road with really no training, no qualifications, and that, is not improving highway safety. So I think we've got to start more at the initial stages here, strengthen these testing protocols, these licensing standards, of course, bolstering the training requirements as well. It kind of all goes hand in hand to really ensure that the drivers getting on the road are qualified, are trained, and know what they're doing. And I think if we can get to that point, we're going to have a lot more driver retention. It's going to, just really build the industry up from, a sustainability long-term career. If we've got people that really want to be in it, who know what they're doing, who, when they face the first bit of challenge, aren't going to, want to find a new occupation. So that goes all hand in hand, working together. And I think this executive order really speaks to a number of systemic issues that need to be addressed.
Okay. Well, Jay, we're out of time, but thank you very much for the information. We sure appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
I've been talking with OOIDA's Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Landline Now will be back in a moment.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com. Because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Welcome back. We've got just enough time to take a quick trip across the U.S. for a look at what states are up to when it comes to trucking-related matters. From left lane and passing rule revisions to speed cameras, Keith Goebel of Landline Magazine is here, as he so often is, with the details. Keith, how you been?
What'd you say?
I said you
went through that so fast. I
said you're here with the details, as you often are, and we're going to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
As promised.
We'll try to slow our roll a little bit and take a little bit of time and not zip right through this, but yeah, some interesting stuff going on, topics that folks hopefully are interested in.
And one of those things is left lane rules. It seems like there are always states looking at this issue, I guess because it's something that people care about. I'm not quite sure, but we've got a couple states looking at this issue right now. Louisiana being one, and I know they just had a bill that was just signed into law by the governor, kind of taking aim at slowpokes, or I guess revising some of the rules there for slowpokes in the left lane.
Yeah, I know I love a good left lane law, and Louisiana.
That's why you get up in the morning.
Louisiana's got one of those now. Yeah, of course, every state's got them. Of course, you got 50 states. You have quite a variation in what the rules are. And in Louisiana, the law has been, if you're out in the left lane, you're not in violation of their law unless you're driving at least 10 miles per hour below the posted speed. And if you're doing that, like if you are a definite slowpoke out in the left lane, you face up to $100 fine. And I mean, there's another rule in there that says, I guess if it was really egregious, if it resulted in some significant issue, you could face jail time up to about a month in jail. But it's essentially it's $100 fine if you're driving out in the left lane of Louisiana for too long, 10 miles per hour below the posted speed. So what they've done here with this new law that takes effect on August 1st, they've gotten rid of that 10 mile per hour parameter. You don't have to be going 10 miles per hour below the posted speed. Just simply traveling out in the left lane below the posted speed, which in essence would be at least 1 mile per hour below the speed, you'd be in violation. So trying to clear things up in the left lane there, and they've also included you might want to get into a little bit here, is a monetary enhancement as well if you are found in violation.
A monetary enhancement. Yes, I like the way you phrase that there. Yeah, there's pretty big fines, and I think in general this is an issue that no matter who you are or where you come from or what you believe, I think for the most part people are in agreement that slowpokes in the left lane. We're not fans, right? And they're putting the screws to them here with these fines, it looks like.
Well, sure. For some folks, just the fact that there is a driving law isn't enough of a reason for them to try to adhere to it.
Yeah.
So obviously, you have in a lot of instances. In some rules of the road, the punishment does not fit the crime. It could be excessive, and in other cases, it's just like, well, it's just kind of a slap in the wrist. It's even though really the focus is on motorists, it's like, it's the cost of business. I want to get somewhere 2 minutes faster. I'm willing to risk $100. Take my chances. So anyway, in addition to the revision to the mile per hour part of this law, talked about the $100 fine. What they've done now with this is for first-time offenders, they're found to be $150, so it's already going up. And if you have a repeat offense within a year, it would go up to $250. And as you might probably be able to figure out before I even say it, is if you have a third offense within a year, it would be a $350 fine. But in addition to that, and we talked about how it is an existing law where there's the possibility of jail time, with a third offense within a year's time, there would also be the possibility of that imprisonment again, up to 30 days. So essentially, if you're a first offender in Louisiana and you're going below the posted speed by 1 mile per hour, you don't face the possibility of jail time now. It is for those folks who have shown that about $1,000 worth of fines over the course of 1 year is not enough of a deterrent, so they have that possibility of jail time.
Yeah, I'm imagining that conversation. What are you in for? driving slow in the left lane. I'm not sure how that would go over in jail, but hey.
You probably wouldn't get much sympathy.
No, you're probably
from
right.
somebody else in jail,
You're probably right. Yeah, you probably wouldn't be treated too well, for sure. Let's look at Idaho here, also looking at this issue as well, and they do have a new law in effect too. This one related to passing rules?
Yeah, in Idaho, and theirs is taking effect here in a very short period of time, July 1st. They were the first state this year to act to do something with their left lane law. And the focus here in Idaho is essentially one-lane roads. So you've got 2 lanes totally, 1 lane going each direction. When you're coming up into a passing zone or passing lane, trying to address those passes, as it has been now. You cannot go, a passenger vehicle cannot go more than 15 miles per hour above the speed limit temporarily to make a pass. What they're doing with this new law is, okay, so when you're on those 2-lane roads, and then there is a passing lane that's up ahead, and in those particular instances, as was pointed out by bill sponsors there in the Idaho State House, was that, okay, so you're traveling along, again, the focus is on motorists. You're traveling along and there's a vehicle in front of you and it's going below the posted speed, and then you're getting into this passing lane area. The intent is for that vehicle to get to the right, so that the traffic behind can go through. Yeah. What this new law is allowing is when that happens, that the passing vehicle can go up to 15 miles per hour above the posted speed until they make the pass. The reason why they're doing this is because they have found, or there have been plenty of instances, and I know I've seen this, not just in Idaho, but anywhere I'm driving, I come into that particular type of area, is you've got a vehicle that's moving slow, and then you have that passing lane come into play, and then you think, okay, now I'm going to be able to pass these guys, and then that slower moving vehicle speeds up.
Yeah. Love that.
Until you get to the end of the area, and then they get back over in the left lane, and then they may very well go back down to below the speed limit again.
Yep.
So they're trying to
Happens
address
all
as
the
a
time.
road rage concern.
Yeah.
So they're addressing that with this new law.
Yeah. Well, again, I think this is an issue that unites most of the country. Another one as well, I think, speed cameras. I know there probably are fans out there of speed cameras, but I think the majority of people are not fans of them. In Maryland, they've already got some working in the state, I believe, right? But they're
all over the place.
They're all over the place. Okay, but they're expanding that now, right? With
Yeah,
the
a bit.
new law.
Speed cameras, they're used in multiple counties. They're around the state. Not surprisingly, the most populated parts of the state, county-wise. There are 45 municipalities around the state that at least are authorized to use these devices, and they've got them in highway work zones. So yeah, if you travel through Maryland, you're well aware of this, but you might not be well aware of is that there are some revisions coming in. They're going to, statewide, with the new statewide rule is that they're going to have escalating fines. As it is now, there's a maximum $40 fine. They're going to allow escalating fines. So, like the more above the posted speed limit that you're going, will determine what your fine is. The maximum fine would be if you're over 40 miles per hour over the posted speed, you'd face a $425 fine.
Yeah.
So doing that, and then also expanding on in certain locations like Prince George's County, Baltimore County, the city of Baltimore. Also Montgomery County, some expansion on the use of these devices on certain stretches of roadway in Prince George's County and Montgomery County, and then Interstate 695 and 83 there in Baltimore County. Going to have more of the cameras posted. So yeah, bigger and better as far as the use of speed cameras there in Maryland.
What'd you call it? Monetary enhancements?
Monetary enhancements.
Is that what you? Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully that makes sense.
Monetary deterrence and enhancements, whatever you want to call them. You can check out whatever Keith calls them over on our website, landline.media. He's got these stories and others there. You can go check him out. Keith, we appreciate it as always.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And that's our show for today. We thank you for listening to Landline Now, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow with another show. Until then, take care.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
A son,
a husband,
wife,
I'm a writer. photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
My kids.
chrome.
And I am
a professional truck driver.
And together, we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us! Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.